Blood Tear River, Montana Territory, summer 1879. The fire did not creep. It charged. Pine exploded into sparks. Resin popped like gunfire. The timber camp, weeks of labor stacked into neat rows, became a single screaming wall of flame in less than 10 minutes. Men ran, axes dropped, boots slipped in ash. Someone was shouting orders that no one could hear anymore. At the riverbank, Harlan Hammer Burke, fought with a rope that burned his palms. The raft had to be finished. That was the only thought left in his head. The downstream trail was already cut off by fire. The Blood Tear River was the last chance. 30 miles of snowmelt flood, white with rage, famous for killing better men than him. Harlan was built for this kind of work. 6'6", 260 pounds of muscle hammered into shape by logging camps and frozen mornings. His arms could swing a maul all day. His grip could split oak. But right now, his hands were shaking, not from heat, not from exhaustion, from fear. Not now. Christ, please, not now. The logs shifted as he cinched them together. Too loose. No, too tight. He had to redo the knot. His fingers fumbled clumsy, betraying him like they always did when panic crept in. Behind him, the cook tent collapsed in a roar of sparks, and someone screamed his name. "Harlan, wait!" He turned. Clara was running toward the river, or trying to. She was limping badly, her twisted ankle forcing her into an uneven, desperate hop. Smoke streaked her face. The dark birthmark across her cheek stood out sharply against the soot, making her look half burned already. 320 pounds of womanhood the camp had never let her forget. The men called her the Stump, wide, solid, in the way, good for cooking and nothing else. Harlan's chest tightened. The raft was barely big enough for him. He knew it. Everyone who worked the Blood Tear knew it. In flood season, weight meant death. "You'll sink it," he shouted, panic sharpening his voice. "You're too heavy." The words hit her like a slap, but she didn't stop. Flames licked at the tree line behind her, heat warping the air. "Look at the water," Clara shouted back, breath ragged. "It's flood swollen. Snowmelt. A light raft will flip at Devil's Bend. I know this river," Harlan snapped. "That's why I need speed." "You need stability," she screamed. "That current's moving 30 miles an hour. A light raft will cartwheel. You need ballast, and I'm the best ballast you've got." He froze because she was right. Too light, and the Blood Tear would treat you like driftwood. Too heavy, and you'd sink. But the right mass, low and centered, Harlan's mind raced through angles, currents, memories of men he'd buried. His hands shook harder. When survival demands what the world has taught us to reject, do we cling to pride, or do we listen? The dust of the frontier has swallowed many souls, but some stories are carved into the very stone of these canyons. If you wish to witness the flickering flame of hope in a heart thought lost, join us here at Legends of Western Love. Subscribe, traveler, and let us walk this long trail together. Clara reached the raft, coughing, eyes blazing. "Decide," she shouted. Harlan swallowed. "Get on," he growled. "And if we die, it's my fault," she finished, already climbing aboard. Her weight settled onto the logs. The raft dipped, then steadied. Harlan shoved off just as the flames reached the riverbank, fire roaring behind them, water screaming ahead. The Blood Tear opened its jaws, and together they went in. The river took them the moment the raft cleared the bank. Not gently. The blood-tear river slammed into the logs like it meant to punish them for daring. White water exploded upward, soaking them instantly. The raft twisted, groaned, fought to turn sideways. Harlan planted his boots and drove the oar into the torrent. The force nearly ripped it from his hands. "Hold!" he barked. Whether to the raft, the river, or himself, he didn't know. Clara dropped low without being told. She pressed herself against the slick logs, spreading her weight instinctively, the way she'd learned to brace herself on greasy kitchen floors during stampedes of hungry men. The raft bucked. Harlan's hands trembled harder. Not now, not again. They shot through the first rapid sideways, water smashing into Clara's back. She grunted but didn't cry out. Instead, she shifted, slow, deliberate, dragging her mass a few inches toward the downstream side. The raft corrected. Harlan felt it immediately. The violent roll softened. The nose dipped just enough to cut the current instead of fighting it. "What the hell?" he muttered. "Read the water," Clara shouted. "It's lifting on your left." Harlan snapped his eyes up. She was right. The left side surged upward, threatening to flip them. Before he could react, Clara moved, rolling her weight across the logs, her body a living counterbalance. The raft leveled. They blasted through the rapid intact. Harlan sucked in a sharp breath. Again, another wave, another tilt. Again Clara moved, not panicked, not flailing. Each shift was precise, timed to the river's rhythm. She didn't fight the water, she listened to it. Minutes blurred together into chaos and noise. Spray burned Harlan's eyes. His arms screamed. His hands shook so badly he nearly lost the oar twice. But the raft stayed upright, because Clara made it so. "You don't stop moving unless I say," Harlan shouted. "Then don't stop steering," she shot back. It wasn't kindness that bound them now. It was necessity. That partnership is often born not from affection, but from the simple truth that alone we fail faster. They hit a brief calm stretch. Harlan gasped, chest heaving, muscles trembling. He glanced down at his hands. They were steady. He stared stunned. "What?" Clara asked, noticing his look. "Nothing," he said quickly, ashamed. "Get ready. Devil's Bend is next." Her face hardened. "I know." The canyon walls tightened ahead, funneling the river into a roaring throat. Water accelerated, boiling into white fury. "This is where men die," Harlan said. "Then we won't," Clara replied. Not bravado, not hope. Statement of fact. They entered the bend. The river tried everything, lifting, twisting, slamming. Harlan steered with brutal focus, eyes locked on the narrow line of survival. Clara became motion itself, shifting, bracing, anchoring them again and again. They burst out the other side battered, but alive. When the water finally eased, Harlan sagged to his knees, laughing hoarsely. "Damn it," he breathed. "You weren't lying." Clara wiped water from her eyes. "I never do when it matters." They drifted toward the shadow of a rock overhang, a place to hide before night fell. Neither of them spoke of leaving the other behind anymore. The pact was sealed. They dragged the raft into a narrow cave, hidden behind a curtain of falling water. The roar of the river dulled there, softened into a constant, thunderous breath that vibrated through stone and bone alike. Mist clung to everything. The air was cold enough to sting lungs already raw from smoke and fear. Harlan collapsed against the rock wall, legs giving out beneath him. Only then did the shaking return. It started in his fingers, small, traitorous tremors, then spread up his forearms like a sickness finding home. He curled his hands into fists, pressing them hard against his thighs, trying to crush the movement out of them. It didn't work. Clara noticed immediately she had wedged the raft securely, checked the rope twice, and gathered what little dry kindling hadn't been soaked. When she turned back, she saw him staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "You're shaking again," she said quietly. "Mind your business," he snapped, too fast, too sharp. She didn't flinch. Instead, she crouched and built a small fire with practiced efficiency, shielding the flame with her broad body until it caught. The warmth spread slowly, fighting the damp inch by inch. When she stood, Harlan had pulled a flask from his coat. The cork popped. Before he could drink, Clara crossed the cave in 2 heavy steps and took it from his hand. "No!" He looked up at her, rage flashing. "Give it back!" "No!" He surged to his feet, unsteady, and lunged for it. Clara moved, not away, aside. She pivoted on one foot and let his momentum carry him past her. Harlan slammed his shoulder first into the stone wall with a grunt, pain flaring bright enough to steal his breath. The flask rolled across the cave floor. Clara stood over him, chest rising and falling, eyes steady. "You don't shake because you're weak," she said. "You shake because you're scared." Harlan laughed harshly. "You don't know a damn thing about me." "Then tell me," she said. "Because I just trusted you with my life." Silence filled the cave, broken only by water and fire. Harlan slid down the wall until he was sitting again, head bowed. For a long time he said nothing. Then very quietly he spoke. "I had a daughter." Clara sat down across from him, close enough to hear but far enough to let him breathe. "Emma," he continued, 3 years old, light as a feather. His mouth twisted. "She loved being carried, thought it was flying." His hands began to shake harder. "We were crossing a ravine on a rope bridge, just me and her. Wind picked up." He swallowed. "My hands started doing this. Same as always when I'm scared." Clara didn't interrupt. "I told myself to breathe, to focus, but fear doesn't listen." His voice cracked. "I lost my grip, just for a second." The cave felt smaller. "I heard her hit the rocks," he said. "Didn't even see it, just the sound." Yet he pressed his shaking hands together like he was praying to something that had already turned away. "I drink so they stop," he finished, "but they never really do." The fire popped softly. Clara rolled up her sleeves. Harlan's eye caught on the scars immediately, thick rope-burn rings encircling both wrists, old and angry, cutting deep into flesh that had never quite healed right. "I wasn't born like this," she said. He looked up, drawn despite himself. "When I was 16, my parents sold me," she continued, voice flat, almost clinical. "Debt, bad crops, bad luck. They said I'd be fed and housed." Her fingers traced the scars absently. "The madam tied me to a bed to break me in, said no man wanted a girl who fought." She met his eyes, so I made myself something no one wanted. Understanding flickered across Harlan's face. "I ate," Clara said. "Everything, scraps, dough, grease, until I was too heavy, too ugly, until she couldn't sell me." A bitter smell tugged at her mouth. "She returned me as damaged goods." The words echoed. "This body," Clara went on, placing a hand on her own stomach, "saved my life. It was armor, weight no one could throw around, and today," she gestured toward the river, "it saved yours, too." Harlan stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, not as burden, not as ballast, as choice. He reached out slowly, hesitantly, and took her hand. Her grip was solid, warm, real, and just like that, the shaking stopped. Harlan tucked in a breath, startled. Clara felt it too. She squeezed his hand once. You don't drop what you're holding when you decide it matters. He laughed, shaky and broken but honest. You always talk like you've thought about things too much. She shrugged. Pain gives you time. They sat there as the fire burned lower, the river raging on outside like it always would. Two people cracked open, not by ice or water, but by truth. For the first time, neither of them felt alone in their fear. Morning reached the cave slowly, diluted by mist and the constant veil of falling water. Clara woke first. Her back ached from the cold stone. Her ankle throbbed dully, but the fire still breathed a low warmth. Harlan slept against the wall, head tipped forward, hair damp and darkened by spray. In sleep, his hands were still. She noticed that first. It mattered more than she expected. Clara moved quietly, testing her ankle, then rose and checked the raft. One log had split along the edge, another rope was frayed, nothing fatal, not yet. When she turned back, Harlan was watching her. You always move like you're expecting trouble, he said. She gave a small smile. Trouble has good timing. They ate what little they had, hard bread softened in river water, a strip of salt pork. It wasn't comfort, but it was fuel. Outside the cave, the river had dropped a fraction, still violent, still deadly, but survivable. They pushed off mid-morning. The water remained angry, but it was no longer trying to kill them every second. Harlan steered with renewed focus. Clara settled into the bow without being asked, anchoring herself low and forward, her weight placed with intent. They had found a rhythm. By late afternoon, the canyon widened. The current slowed into long, heavy pulls instead of sudden snaps. Pines reappeared along the banks, their reflections wavering on darker water. Harlan grounded the raft on a gravel bar just before dusk. "This'll do," he said. They built camp quickly. Clara gathered driftwood. Harlan set lines for fish with the ease of a man who'd done it 1,000 times before. That night, Clara cooked over open flame. Nothing fancy. Fish, blistered and salted, but the smell curled through the clearing like a promise. Harlan watched her work, the confidence in her movements, the way she filled space without apology. "You always feed people," he said. She glanced at him. "It's how I know they'll stay." The words hung between them. He didn't look away. "I'm not going anywhere." Something in Clara loosened. Over the next days, they traveled together, camping along the riverbanks, moving when the water allowed, resting when it didn't. Harlan taught her how to read eddies, how to judge depth by color and sound. Clara showed him how to redistribute supplies, how to balance loads so his arms didn't burn out as fast. One evening, as they laughed over a botched attempt at bread cooked on a flat stone, their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. Another day, Clara surprised him by hauling the raft free of a snagged root on her own, grunting with effort, refusing his help. Harlan stared. "You could have asked." She wiped sweat from her brow. I wanted to see if I could." The pride in his smile startled her. Slowly, almost without noticing, Clara stopped trying to make herself smaller. She took up space by the fire. She laughed louder. She spoke without checking his face first. And Harlan, who had built his whole life around control, found peace in letting her steady what he no longer could alone. By the time the river began to calm for good, they were no longer just escaping. They were choosing. The river gave them a week of mercy, long, dragging bends, water dark and deep, pulling instead of punching, the kind of stretch that lets the mind wander, dangerous in its own way. They were breaking camp at dawn when Clara heard it. Metal, not the river's song, not stone iron on iron. She froze, hand still on the pot handle. "Harlan," she said quietly, "listen." He stilled, head tilted. There, again, the faint clink of chain, and beneath it, voices, men upstream. Harlan's jaw tightened. He scanned the canyon walls, then the water ahead. The blood tear narrowed there, funneled between cliffs into a throat of shadow. "I should have known," he muttered. "Who?" Clara asked. "Bandits," he said. "The fire wasn't just bad luck." They pushed off fast, the raft sliding into the current with a whisper that felt too loud. As they rounded the bend, the truth revealed itself. A chain, thick as a man's wrist, stretched across the narrowest point of the canyon, anchored deep into both cliffs. It sagged slightly in the middle, rusted but massive, a trap meant to stop rafts cold, snap them, drown whoever tried to pass. Above, silhouettes moved along the rim, rifles glinted. Behind them, the river hissed, impatient. Ahead, the chain, and beyond it, a waterfall, 20 feet, maybe more. The water plunged into a boiling pool that swallowed sound. They were boxed in. "Turn back," Harlan said automatically, already shifting his weight to angle the raft. Clara grabbed his forearm. "No." He looked at her sharply. "They'll pick us off if we stall. And they'll pick us off if we turn," she said. "Look." She pointed upstream. Smoke rose faintly in the distance. Another fire, fresh. "They're driving people toward the chain," she said, "like cattle." Harlan swore. "Bastards!" The raft drifted closer. The chain loomed larger, links scarred and gouged where past victims had slammed into it. "We can't stop," Harlan said. "If we hit that thing head on, it'll cut us in half." Clara's eyes were on the sagging center. "How fast are we moving?" she asked. He blinked. "What?" "How fast?" she repeated. "Miles an hour." Harlan's mind shifted gears. "Current here, maybe 25. Closer to 30 near the drop." "And the raft," she said. "With both of us." "Weight?" 700 pounds, counting supplies. She nodded slowly. "No," he said, seeing the look on her face. "Absolutely not." "We can break it," she said. Harlan stared. "That chain's industrial grade. It'll rip the raft apart." "Not if we hit it right," she said. "Not straight on." She pointed again. "See the sag? That's the weak point. The anchors take the load, but the middle's stressed, rusted, tired." "This is madness," he said. "It's physics," she replied. "Momentum, mass times velocity. We have both." And Harlan shook his head. "You're talking about turning us into a battering ram." "Yes." "And what's the plan?" he snapped, fear bleeding into anger. "To die creatively." She met his eyes. "When I say now, you drop flat," she said. "I'm going to jump." "Jump where?" he demanded. "Trust me." The words landed heavier than any argument. Harlan looked at the chain, the rifles above, the waterfall ahead. Then he looked at Clara, the woman who had steadied his hands, the woman who had become balance itself. "I trust you," he said. The river accelerated, dragging them forward, whether they agreed or not. Bandit shouted from the rim. A rifle cracked. The shot went wide, echoing uselessly. Paddle! Clara shouted. Harder! Harlan dug in. His muscles screamed. The raft surged. 30 yards, 20. Clara moved to the front, bracing herself at the bow. She crouched, fingers gripping the slick logs. Physics, she told herself. Don't think about fear. Think about force. 10 yards. The chain filled her vision, iron links vibrating with the river's pull. Now! She screamed. Harlan dropped flat. Clara jumped, not off the raft, but into it. Her full weight slammed down onto the nose, 320 pounds, driving the front logs under the surface. The raft pitched sharply, bow plunging, stern lifting. The chain struck not the front, but the underside. Wood and iron met at an angle, 700 pounds of mass moving at nearly 30 miles an hour. The chain screamed, links tore free, rust exploded, iron snapped like bone under strain it was never meant to bear. The raft shot through the gap and went airborne. They fell, white exploded upward, sound vanished, the world became water and weight. They hit the pool below in a chaos of spray and splintered wood. Harlan was thrown clear, lungs burning as he surfaced, choking, searching. Clara! He roared. She was sinking. Her clothes were waterlogged, dragging her down. Exhaustion pulled at her limbs like hands. Harlan didn't think. He dove. Cold crushed his chest. His hands found her waist, solid and real. He kicked, legs screaming, hauling her toward the light. They broke the surface together and staggered into the shallows, collapsing onto wet sand. For a long moment there was only coughing, water, breath. Clara tried to sit up, tried to cover herself, shame reflexive even now. Harlan stopped her. Don't, he said. She looked at him, confused, tears cutting clean lines through soot on her face. You're beautiful, he said, and I'm never letting you go. He kissed her, fierce, desperate, like a man choosing life. When they pulled apart, Clara was crying. Your hands, she whispered. Harlan looked down. They were steady, because the shadow had returned, and together they had broken it. The pool below the falls churned and then released them, as if the river itself had decided it was done, testing their resolve. They crawled onto the gravel bar, soaked, shaking, not with fear now, but with the aftermath of survival. Above them, shouts echoed from the canyon rim. The bandits were scrambling, angry that their trap had failed, but the broken chain swung uselessly in the current. Harlan dragged the raft farther up the bank, muscles screaming. Clara limped beside him, every step deliberate. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The stand came quickly. Boots appeared on the rocks above, then silhouettes, rifles leveled downward. You should have drowned, a voice called. Now throw the woman back in the water and maybe we let you walk. Harlan felt the old instinct surge, the need to shield, to step forward, to absorb the threat. He reached for his rifle. His hands trembled, just a little. Clara saw it. She stepped in front of him. Clara, he began. No, she said calmly. You've carried enough. She bent, picked up a broken length of chain, washed onto the gravel. Heavy, awkward, perfect. The bandits laughed when they saw her move, laughed harder when they saw what she held. Clara swung the chain in a wide arc, letting it scrape stone, letting the sound travel up the canyon walls. You come down here, she called up, voice steady, and I promise you won't climb back out. The laughter faltered. She took another step forward, planting her feet like roots. The chain settled against her shoulder, its weight familiar, welcome. Harlan raised his rifle then, not to threaten, but to finish what she'd begun. The barrel was steady now, perfectly still. The bandits hesitated. They had expected fear, begging, chaos. They hadn't expected resolve. A shot cracked, but not from the rim. Harlan fired first. The bullet shattered rock inches from the lead man's boot. The message was clear. Silence followed, then retreat. Boots scrambled backward. Voices cursed. The silhouettes vanished from the edge. When it was over, Clara's knees finally gave out. Harlan caught her. "You did that," he said, awe threaded through his voice. She shook her head weakly. "We did." They stood there together as the river rushed on, the broken chain clanking softly like a defeated thing. The stand had been made, not with brute force alone, but with balance, trust, and the courage to let strength take an unexpected form. The days after the stand moved slowly, as if the river itself had decided to lower its voice. They traveled no more than a few miles a day now. Clara's ankle needed rest, and Harlan, though steadier than he had been in years, was learning the cost of pushing too hard after terror loosened its grip. Healing, it turned out, demanded patience. Neither of them had ever been taught. They built a small shelter on a bend of the river where the banks widened and the currents softened. Driftwood walls, a roof of canvas and pine boughs, nothing permanent, enough. At night, Clara cooked, not out of duty, not because anyone demanded it, but because the act itself had changed. Feeding someone who stayed felt different than feeding men who passed through and forgot your name. Harlan watched her from the firelight, noticing how she no longer apologized with her posture. She sat where she wanted, took the space she needed. When she laughed, it filled the shelter without restraint. One evening, as rain whispered against the canvas, Harlan finally spoke the words that had been sitting heavy in his chest. "I still see her sometimes," he said. "Emma, in my dreams." Clara didn't reach for him right away. She waited, giving the truth room. "She doesn't fall anymore," he continued, voice quiet. "She just looks at me, like she's waiting to see what I'll do next." Clara moved then, sitting beside him, her shoulder pressing into his, solid, anchoring. "And what do you do?" she asked. "I stay," he said. "For the first time, I don't run." She rested her head against his arm. "That's all children ever ask," she said, "that you stay." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. Later, when the fire burned low, Harlan turned to her, expression stripped of bravado. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "And I don't want you thinking you're only here because you're useful." Clara smiled sadly. "I spent most of my life being tolerated. Being needed is new." He shook his head. "That's not what I meant." He took her hands, big, scarred, steady now. "I want you because you choose to be here," he said. "Not because you saved me, not because you balance a raft, because when you're here, I'm not afraid of myself." Clara's breath caught. "I choose you," she said, "not because you're strong, but because you're honest when it hurts." They kissed then, not with desperation, not with fear, but with the quiet certainty of two people who had already seen each other at their worst and stayed anyway. In the morning, the river glittered under a clean sky. They packed slowly, not to run, but to build something that could last.
Some stories end when the danger passes. Others end when two people decide they are no longer running. Harlan and Clara did not conquer the river. They learned how to listen to it, how to balance fear with trust, strength with presence. What the world had mocked as excess became steadiness. What had once shaken learned to hold. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson left on the banks of the blood tear, that survival is not always about becoming lighter, faster, harder, but about finding the weight that keeps you from flipping when the current turns cruel. If this story stayed with you, ask yourself, what part of you has been called a burden when it might be the very thing that keeps you steady?